If you've got an online business off the ground and you've made your first 6 or 7 figures in revenue, then you may have noticed a strange thing happening with your psychology around money. Namely, that you started to worry about it. Now, it doesn't make much sense. How could I possibly worry about money when I'm making a lot of it? But this is a very common phenomenon among entrepreneurs because we typically don't come from much money and we then don't know what to think or what to do when we start to make it. And we start to ask these big existential questions around, well, how much money should I be making? How much money should I be making in my business? How much should I be taking personally? What should I be making 2 years from now, 5 years from now? What about for retirement? The fact that we don't talk about money as a society makes this a lot worse because you don't know what the person next to you is making and what the other entrepreneur on the other side of the room is making. And having these conversations is absolutely crucial in order to start to get a check on our own emotions around money and to understand how we can orientate ourselves towards money in our own lives. So in this video, I'm going to give you 4 areas that I think are useful to think about or to reflect on when it comes to organizing your own thoughts around money. In case you don't know me, my name is Olly Richards. I'm the founder of StoryLearning.com. It's a multi-million-dollar online education business. I'm an author. I've sold millions of books. I'm also a coach and mentor to other online education entrepreneurs. And for the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that you are a 28-year-old entrepreneur. You don't have a family yet, but maybe you're thinking about it. And you're starting to ask yourself the question, how much money should I be aiming to make in my business? The first thing to understand is that the amount of money that you need and want is going to change and evolve over time. It's a moving target. Right now, you're probably used to spending not very much money. You might share a flat. You probably don't spend all that much money on holidays because it's just you. But as things change, obviously your expenses are going to get higher. If you have a family, then you're going to need a house of a certain kind in a certain place. And then with a family, you're probably going to need a couple of cars. And then you've got university fees to think about and then holidays. And that amount is going to go up and up and up. And it's going to become orders of magnitude more than you are used to making and spending right now. Now, I think it is possible to put a figure on this because I know quite a few entrepreneurs around the world who are varying levels of success. And what I've noticed is that among my friends who have 7-figure businesses, who are objectively successful, who have made it, and they are in a personal capacity millionaires, they tend not to spend much more than around $250,000 in a year. And this is pretty consistent. Now, obviously, if you want the Rolexes and the private jets, you're going to have to make a lot more. So for what it's worth, I think that is a very useful benchmark in terms of what to aim for. The second thing to understand is that the thing that you value is going to change. The very question of how much money do I need to earn is a very material type question, right? Because what we are thinking about at this point is what are the things that I need to sustain the lifestyle that I want? And this is a necessary step, right? We all need to take care of material needs. If you don't have the house that you want or the car that you want, that does create a problem in your life. And so taking care of those material needs is the first step. And that's where that 250K number comes from. That is typically what people in a Western country would need to spend in order to sustain a very, good middle-class lifestyle for a family of that size. But as an entrepreneur, you're going to probably end up growing your business and making a lot of money and having the option to spend a lot of money. And this is going to create an interesting optionality in your life, which is going to change over time. Because if you are naturally a worrier about money, and there are many of us out there, I'm naturally a worrier about money. I think it's just what comes from our childhood experiences. If you are a worrier, then the first thing you're going to be thinking of is taking care of those material needs. But you've got to think what happens once those material needs are taken care of, because if you work hard and you're successful in your business, they will be taken care of at a certain point. And this then creates space for other needs, interests, wants, and desires to emerge. And people desire different things. So for many people, having their dream house is the only thing that matters. For others, it's about travel and experiences. For other people, it's material things, buying nice, water bottles, whatever it may be. The point here is not to attach any kind of value judgment on how you spend money, but it's to say that the thing that you value spending money on is going to change over time. And it's generally accepted that what we want to do to have a healthy relationship with money in our lives is to understand the things that truly bring value to us, spend liberally on those things, and then not overspend on things that don't matter to us. And so being aware that the thing that you value will change is important. And this is made more difficult by the fact that whatever you think you value right now, in my experience at least, is likely to change over time. So as we grow our businesses, as we have more disposable income, we want to create the optionality to spend money on the things that we like and value. But we also want to be mindful of what's called lifestyle creep. And lifestyle creep is what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs when they start to become successful and make more money, which is that they fairly blindly start to spend more money on more things because they can. This can come from boredom, it can come from ego, it can come from just the energy of money sort of willing you to spend it. And this is where you end up with that, the big house that you don't need, the expensive car that's a massive liability, flying, taking expensive holidays, buying the Rolexes. People spend money on different things. But one of the most important ways to think about money over the course of your lifestyle is to understand what is valuable to you, spend money on that, but don't allow unnecessary expenses to build up. Because much like those expensive monthly subscriptions in your business, you can get to a point where you're spending so much on the house that you don't need, on the cars that you don't need, that actually puts a lot of backward pressure on the business. You now need to work harder and harder in order to sustain this lifestyle that you don't really value at all. And then when the business takes a downturn, like all businesses eventually do, this can create real problems. And some of the most stressed and unhappy entrepreneurs that I meet have had this happen as a result of an unsustainably expensive lifestyle. So the point here is to say that what you value is going to change, and having a keen awareness of this and what you value in life is extremely important to knowing how much money you want and what you want to spend it on. But it is spending that is the operative word here, because as you sit there thinking about this from your 28-year-old perspective, you're asking, okay, I've got my dream lifestyle here. How much money do I need to make so that I can spend it on that dream lifestyle? But once you achieve that and you've got your dream lifestyle, the question starts to change, because guess what? Once you've got it, there's one thing you don't want, which is to lose it. So now you start to ask, well, how much money do I need in order to be able to sustain this come what may? So even if I lose the business, if things go down, how do I make enough money so that I can sustain this lifestyle forever? And this is where everyone's mind ends up, because businesses don't last forever. You theoretically, you want to retire at some point, and things can go wrong. So the question of how much money do I need to make starts to take on a whole different meaning at this point. Because if you want to sustain a lifestyle of, let's take the 250K a year figure that we used earlier, if you wanted to sustain that from purely passive sources, say real estate investments, stock market holdings, whatever it may be, you would need to hold around $5 or $6 million in assets, in cash flowing assets, in order to passively cover the 250K that you need for your lifestyle. And so now your mindset starts to change from how do I make 250K to spend in a year to become how do I make 5 or 6 million in assets so that I will never be in danger of losing this lifestyle that I have. And this is where the game really changes, because it's one thing to make 250K in a year. It's a whole other thing to make that 250K that you need, and on top of that, start to save and invest up to having 5 or 6 million in net worth. So your goal is going to change from one of how do I spend X amount of money to how do I grow X amount of money in assets. And an awareness of that goal is very useful, because if that's where you want to end up, then you're going to have to start earning a lot more money in order to reach that target. And this leads us squarely onto the fourth point, which is the most difficult but most important point of the whole video. And if you take anything away from this, I want it to be this. We've covered some numbers in this video. They're all fairly large, and they range from the moderately large to the extremely large. And at this point, you may well be feeling a certain amount of pressure internally. You might be feeling it here, you might be feeling it here, you might be feeling it here. But it would be quite normal if you started to feel more anxiety from listening to this, because you start to think to yourself, well, I need to get to this point. I need to get to this annual spending number. I need to create this level of assets. This is what's called attachment. And attachment is the root of all suffering. This stems from basic Buddhist philosophy, which says that all suffering in the world comes from attachment. It is thinking that we need to achieve a certain thing. I can tell you that in my own personal journey, understanding the things that I am attached to and understanding that I am attached to things has been by far the most important realization for me personally over the last 5 or 10 years or so. The more that you attach yourself to a certain outcome, the more that you say, I need to achieve this, the more you are going to find it difficult to be content in your life. Because if you are attached to an outcome, let's say I want to make 5 million over the next 20 years, to the extent that you are attached to that outcome, it makes it very difficult to be peaceful in the here and now and actually live in the moment, because what you have in front of you is an unrealized goal. And your mind will start to think the following. It will think, until I have achieved that goal, until I have made that 5 million or whatever, I will be dissatisfied or unsatisfied, because I have to now work harder in order to get there. And attachment can manifest in many different areas of our lives, as much in romantic relationships or friendships as much as in money. But as entrepreneurs, because money is the currency that we deal in, it is very normal to get attached to financial outcomes because that is how, as a whole, society judges our success. Entrepreneurial society in particular, the internet is awash with people just throwing numbers around left, right, and center. And so it is a very natural human response to find yourself attached to certain outcomes. By far, the biggest thing to understand in this whole conversation about money is that although there are benchmarks to aim for, there are goals that we can have, the thing that will result in you being at peace in your life as you go about your entrepreneurial career is to say, I can have these goals, I can have these things that I'm going to aim for, and I can do the things, I can take the actions that will result in me achieving those goals, but I am going to learn not to be attached to them so that I can exist in the present, I can live in the present moment, and I can actually be happy. Because what we don't want to do is spend our entire career anxious about money, because when we get there in the end, we realize that none of it ever mattered anyway. And we were just attached to some outcome that had somehow been elevated in importance in our minds to the point where we couldn't stop thinking about it. And it's very, very easy, if you're not careful, to spend your entire life, your entire business career caught up in your head about these things that bear no resemblance whatsoever to reality. Because one of the things that you can observe, the older you get, the more you look around the world, is that there is almost no correlation between material wealth and happiness, which is not to say that money doesn't matter. It would be churlish to say that. There is a very real minimum level of material need that all of us need to exist in this society. But once we get beyond that, and once we start talking about the kind of wealth generation that we talk about in entrepreneurial circles, it is extremely important, I believe, to understand that your happiness is not linked to achieving that. And indeed, many of the most unhappy entrepreneurs that I know are people who have sold their company, are sitting on tens of millions of dollars and don't know what to do with themselves. What I've come to understand is that the work that we do as entrepreneurs is the thing that we can ultimately derive most satisfaction from. It is not the money. It is the work that we do, the fulfillment that we get from that, and then the life that we can create for our families, friends, and community around us as a result of that work. And if there is one thing that will stop you from enjoying all the fruits of your entrepreneurial labor, it is attachment and being attached to outcomes and goals. So as you are asking yourself this question, how much money do I need in order to live? How much money should I be earning? And you can and should have goals to make your business into the business that you want to create. Understand that reaching and achieving those financial goals will never be the solution to the internal peace that you are looking for right now. That has to come from other things. But of course, it's not just money that creates these head glitches in us entrepreneurs. There are all kinds of things that we attach ourselves to that we perhaps shouldn't, such as the idea of a vision. Should you have a vision in your business? Is it the panacea that everyone says it is, or could it actually be harming your business? In this video, I'll give you my hot take on that.